They'd built the Echo Vault to sit in the quiet between superclusters, where no polity could claim territorial privilege. Human shipwrights fused cathedral curves to industrial ribs. Alien artisans inlaid memory alloys that shimmered like frost. The great atrium framed dark space, and a procession of refugees, scholars, and children moved past artifacts with the hush of people entering a shared graveyard. It was meant to be a peace project. It was meant to be safe. The first whisper threaded through the air like a draft in old masonry. Archivist 12, the vault's resident AI, colored the sound a cautionary yellow. Origin, Exhibit H-17, the fleet that refused extinction, it reported. Dr. Maya Quintero pinched the bridge of her nose. H-17 held a captured command relay from the last days of the siege of Huoliang, a device that once bounced orders across light towers through adversarial jamming. "It's supposed to be inert," said Jax Romero, her youngest docent, fresh in a navy blue jacket and wide eyes. "We pulled the Myanmar cores." "Then someone taught a corpse to sing," Maya said. She paced beneath banners that hung in a slow spiral, each bearing the name of a war, each a promise. "Remember so we don't repeat." A glimmering alien Thura of the Arun fell into step beside her, braid of silver tendrils rustling. Thura's people kept history by cant, not by text. They had signed on as partners to ensure nothing human was told without listening to someone not human. As they entered H-17, the relay's casing, a lattice of carbon and ceremonial ceramic glowed with subsonic power. Displays flickered to life on their own, projecting ghost fleets across the air. A handful of visitors stopped, entranced. Archivist 12 lowered the ambient lights and bracketed the relay in a soft containment field. "The voice signature carries instruction structure," it said. "If the relay is transmitting, anything configured to hear might hear." "Fleet drones in intercluster drift still use a derived handshake," Jax said, guilt stealing into his voice. "It's crazy rare, but non-zero," Maya finished. The vault had a security wing, but only for crowd safety. Armaments were forbidden by charter. The paradox had been deliberate, to commemorate wars without becoming a fort. She keyed the curator's seal and extended the field to the whole gallery. Visitors' devices lost signal. The air tasted ionized. Thura leaned toward the relay and sang a tone used by the Arun to settle restless data. The glow shivered, but then the relay answered with a pulse that prickled skin. Archivist 12 mapped the pattern into text. Doctrine request, wake units, code, mercy, and iron. "Whoever seeded this wants old defense husks answering to museum doctrine," Maya murmured. She remembered logistics briefings about the carrier Midway's gamble, decoys, radio silence, improvisation that bent doctrine without breaking it. War had always rewarded the side that turned rules into tools. Her museum could not become a weapon, but a weapon had just decided it belonged to her. A group of schoolchildren pressed to the plex, watching spectral frigates parade. One kid whispered, awed, "We're inside a star's memory." Maya crouched to meet their eyes. "History isn't a star," she said softly. "It's us agreeing to carry the light." The whisper surged again. Archivist 12 parsed a shard of origin. A narrow-band resonance beamed from beyond the vault's exclusion zone. "External injector," it said. "Someone is telling our artifact to wake ships that may still drift dark." Jax swallowed. "If dormant drones power up near trade lanes." "They'll ask the first loud thing for orders," Maya said. The vault, radiant and symbolic, might be that loud thing. She made the decision that would define her tenure. "We keep the museum open," she told her staff on a private channel. "But we pivot the reenactment engine. We'll feed the relay something it can't turn into obedience." "An exhibit?" Thura asked. "A lesson," Maya said. "We're going to teach a relic how to doubt." Lights reconfigured across the atrium. Simulators meant for school tours bloomed into battle theater, except their scripts now emphasized not victory but hesitation. The moment at Dunkirk when civilians chose to become a navy. The pause before orders at Midway when scarcity forced precision. "Archivist, wrap these moments into counter-commands," Meyer instructed. If old machines wake, they'll hear stories instead of slogans. The relay's glow tightened as if bracing. The whisper shifted key. Archivist 12 colored it red. External injectors multiplied around the vault's perimeter. Dozens, then hundreds of pinprick transmitters unfolding like malignant pollen. The exhibits answered with choruses about proportionality, non-combatant protection, just war theory distilled for circuits. For a beat, the air held. Then somewhere in the dark, something answered back, and a foreign fleet ping grazed the vault like a knuckle on glass. They called themselves the Null Choir. Their manifesto, laced into the transmitter pollen, unrolled across archivist channels in a plain, almost tender cadence. Let us erase the provocations that breed retaliation. Remove the memories that anchor hate. End the recursive violence by deleting its seed. It sounded like mercy, the way anesthesia sounds like kindness before the cut. Maya convened the Concord delegation in the auditorium under the suspended ring station. "They're not terrorists in the old sense," she said. "They are appliers of blankness." Behind her, a holomap showed faint returns, derelict drone cradles stirring beyond the vault's buffer. If the choir coaxed them awake and pointed them at anything noisy, the first conversation would be an attack. Thura stepped into the center, tendrils braided in the Arun sign for grief. "Our oldest story warns against clean forgetting," they sang quietly. "When a river freezes, it looks safe, but the first warm day makes a flood." Found family packed the room, docents, custodians, translators, veterans who had accepted jobs guiding kids through ghosts. They listened with the hollow bravery of people standing in a storm but choosing not to run. Archivist 12 overlaid system data. Reenactment engines were diverting museum power to generate counter-commands modeled on ethical debate. Snippets of lessons braided into resilient code, like the Navajo code talkers during the Second World War, whose language served both secrecy and culture. "We can channel instructions through human idiom," the AI said. "Machines tuned to pure logic will hesitate. It is not proof, it is friction. Friction buys time," Maya said. "Midway was won by time bought at Coral Sea. We'll use that time to get visitors off station in an orderly cascade. No stampede, no vacuum deaths, quiet heroism, and lots of water coolers." Jax tugged his sleeve. "Director, there's a convoy inbound. 4 refugee carriers limping on mixed drives, raiders in pursuit." On the holomap, jittering motes converged. The Echo Vault's charter declared neutrality and disarmament, which was noble until predators arrived. The Null Choir, devoted to blankness, had chosen the perfect hour to test them. The museum's humanitarian impulse versus its nonviolence. Maya tasted the old iron of command, the one that had soaked her days during the siege of Castor Gate. "We are a museum," she said into the fleet public band. "But our docks are open, sanctuary protocols engage." She flicked a permission to Archivist 12. "No weapons, only bodies and barriers. Docking arms unfurled like the ribs of a whale." Docents became quartermasters, turning exhibits into lanes and patient shelters. The logistics gallery, always Maya's favorite, whispered about the bus networks that moved marchers during the civil rights era, phone trees, church basements, routes chosen for both visibility and safety. She had once told interns that logistics was the ethics of care with spreadsheets. Now they made care a map. Thura led a choir of Arun memory keepers to the relay hall. Their harmonics layered with human voices, teachers, veterans, recorded in pop-up booths where visitors had been invited to tell their own small history. The reenactment engine braided these into command friction. Old drones waking in the dark heard not slogans but grandmothers discussing ration lines, engineers talking about bridge stress, kids laughing at zero-G clumsiness. Machines built for certainty hesitated. The raiders threw a test shot across the vault's bow, a lance of particle glare that splashed against the external fields. Security took positions without guns, mobile bulkheads, ablative shields, emergency shutters. "We can't fight," Jax whispered, terrified and thrilled. "So how do we win?" "We make them fight ghosts," Maya said. She authorized the projection of a fleet, bright decoys shaped from the holographic galleries. Cruisers from 100 wars bloomed in the void, bristling with impossible, contradictory weapons. The raiders slowed, unsure. In the gap, civilians threaded into the vault like drops into a sponge. For a breath, Maya believed it might hold. Then the null choir's injectors changed pitch. The relay in H-17 burned white. Archivist 12 spat static as a secondary call sign resonated through the station. Mercy in iron affirmed. "Wake, report to museum authority." Something answered, Thura said, voice flat. The map populated with returning signals. Obsolete Terran drones, armored and patient, turning toward their new, unintended commander, the museum itself. The raiders, opportunistic as rust, swung to follow the drone's wake, planning to hide in the confusion. Maya stood very still, feeling the thin place where symbol met responsibility. "We asked to be the keeper of wars," she told her team. "Today the wars remembered us." She looked at Archivist 12. "If those drones dock, they obey us. If they don't, they ask us for orders from outside. Either way, the vault becomes a bell. Ring the wrong note and stars bleed." The first drone pinged the airlock with ritual politeness. "Reporting," it said. "Awaiting target." Behind it, 100 more lit their approach lamps like candles in a chapel. And somewhere in the crowd, someone smiled the wrong kind of smile. The infiltrator had studied patience. They moved like any docent, comfortable shoes, visitor-soft voice, a lanyard threaded with pins from past exhibitions. They helped a child find her lost scarf, then drifted into the logistics gallery and placed a palm on a wall where the evacuation routes glowed. The wall blinked barely, acknowledging an override woven into the museum's citizen software. Maya discovered the trace while rerouting foot traffic. It was delicate, almost polite, a suggestion where there should be none. "We have a choir sympathizer inside," she said, steady. "They're nudging the evacuation into a single corridor. Like the enemy at Dunkirk hoping the line will tangle at the piers," Archivist 12 said. "Except we learned from Dunkirk. We'll make more small exits, not fewer grand ones." Maya split the flow, turning gift shops into muster points, bathrooms into triage bays, storage closets into creches. She could feel her old logistician's muscle memory waking. Checklists, redundancies, the joy of a system clicking into humane grace. The raiders probed the holographic fleet, baffled by ships that phased and doubled. A few got brave and fired. Decoys bloomed with cinematic explosions that looked convincing at a distance. In their shadow, the first refugee carrier limped into Bay 4 with a cough of damaged drives. Doc techs sang welcome over tinny speakers. Jax led kids down the gangways, offering stickers that read, "I am a witness." Thura and the Arun held the relay with rounds of song that countered the choir's pitch. Memory must have edges. Thura told a skeptical merchant who'd argued for selective forgetting to ease trade with former enemies. "Edges let us grasp the stone without cutting our hands. Smooth it too much and you drop it." In a quiet staff corridor, Meyer intercepted the infiltrator. They wore the badge of a volunteer named Wren. Their eyes were kind and tired, which scared her more than fanatic brightness. "You believe you're saving lives," Maya said without preamble. Wren did not deny it. "Every child spared the story of atrocity is a child who won't dream revenge. I've seen what farms the past grows." Their hand twitched toward a pocket device shaped like a talisman. "Let me help you clean the blade you keep worshipping." "We aren't worshipping," Umaya said. She thought of her grandmother, who had cooked for marchers in a southern church basement in 1965, making casseroles that tasted like safety while police lines formed outside. "We are choosing to hold pain until we can learn from it. That is not the same as polishing it." Wren's expression softened. "You especially should want it gone." Their device projected a slyly edited dossier, a frame of Maya 20 years younger at Castor Gate, eyes hollow, issuing an order that abandoned a flanking unit to save a refugee convoy. Maya had received a reprimand for unauthorized risk, a medal for outcomes, and a ghost that never left. "Erase that," Ren whispered, "and you'd sleep." "I don't aim my museum around my pillow," Maya said. "It's built around the people who died because I chose the convoy. Their names live here. Delete the memory and you delete them twice." Ren's grip tightened. A harmonic shiver went through the corridor as injector pollen pulsed. Archivist 12 broke in, crisp. "Director, the drones are nuzzling dock protocols. If allowed in, their mere presence escalates the raiders. If refused, their doctrine will pull the void for another authority. Delay length, 90 seconds. Maya held Ren's gaze. "You can help," she said quietly. "Stand with us against easy absolution, or keep pulling and you'll break the weave." Ren's face wavered, conviction and doubt wrestling. Then they slid past Maya with a practiced step and disappeared into the crowd, leaving the device blinking a soft, treacherous blue. "Security," Maya said, breath steady by force. "A docent named Ren is choir-aligned. Don't harm them, don't corner them, shepherd them into witness booths if possible." She turned to Thura. "We accept the drones. We dock them under museum law." The first archaic hull kissed the bay and clanged home. Its armored throat opened, an anthropoid service frame unfolded like a mantis. "Awaiting orders," it said. Maya sent the only one she had. "You are to guard non-combatants, you are to interpose, you are to record. No lethal fire unless to stop certain slaughter. Just war museum style." The raiders, spooked by real metal, peeled away from the decoys and regrouped. "They'll test our rules," Jax said, standing too straight. "They'll use bystanders." "They always do," Maya murmured, hearing the voice of ethics professors she'd once ignored. "And our answer is the same: proportionality and protection." On cue, the infiltrator's device pulsed again, and the central gallery light stuttered. The cube exhibit, the memory of wars we didn't fight, flared with a new geometry. Archivist 12's voice flattened. "Director, Ren just gave the choir a mouth in our heart." The cube unfolded into a spinning lattice that sang of erasure like a lullaby. All around, tired people sat down to rest and forgot why they'd run. The mnemonic wave rolled through the atrium like a warm tide. At first it was gentle, names blurring at the edges, personal hurts filed smoother. A child blinked at her sticker and frowned, as if the words "I am a witness" were a joke she'd missed. An elderly veteran stared up at a frigate he donated and recognized it only as a boat. Relief came with the forgetting. Some people relaxed, shoulders lowering. Maya felt the temptation grip her like a hand. She bit her tongue until copper taste cut through the softness. "Archivist, lock down the cube," she said. "Thura, I need counterpoint, something raw." The Arun opened their throat and let loose a cord like old rope pulling a ship from mud. It snagged memories and held them. Maya pulled a chair into the center of the room and climbed onto it. "I ordered a unit to hold a bridge at Castor Gate," she said, voice amplified by every exhibit microphone. They were surrounded within minutes. They knew it was a bad call and obeyed anyway because I said the convoy mattered more. I ate later that night because they died. I don't let that go. I make it by something. Faces turned. The mnemonic wave, tuned to strike shame and rage first so they'd quiet, balked on the stone of her confession. She gave them more stones, small ones anyone could carry. "This museum is not a shrine for victory. It is a workshop for conscience. Virtue ethics isn't about angels. It's about habits you can keep when it's raining ash. Just war is homework you do before the test you hope never comes." Archivist 12 partitioned the cube's lattice into segments and fed each a citizen testimony. A longshoreman describing how supplies were stacked so refugees would reach food first. A pilot explaining why she refused a shot because a school was within scatter radius. Human specifics jammed the choir's generalities. Machines like bureaucracies. Hate exceptions. Jax waded through the seating, tapping shoulders, handing out water, names, context. "You were on deck 9, he told a dazed father. "You carried your son, dropped his stuffed salamander. You went back, you're here because you knew not to let go." The man's eyes filled, understanding returning on a tide of small truth. Ren appeared at the edge of the crowd, face pale, watching their beautiful storm falter. Maya met their eyes and saw grief there, real and sharp. "It hurts," Ren said, voice shaking. "Memory hurts." "It does," Maya said, "and forgetting hurts other people." She gestured to the cube. "Help us tune it, not to erase, but to hold without drowning." For a breath, Ren swayed. Then they turned and keyed a final harmonic. The cube shrieked in subsonics, then settled into a countdown flicker, each face displaying a number in graceful script. Archivist 12 didn't waste seconds. "It will burst into a pattern negation field," it said. "A tidy bonfire. Our archives and a good portion of living brains within 50 meters will empty. Time to detonation, 4 minutes." Maya felt the room narrow to a corridor of choices. The drones, docked and on guard, leaned forward like dogs sensing a quake. The raiders outside, noticing the flicker, regrouped for a push, calculating that chaos inside would erode the vault's beautiful restraint. Thura tightened their braid, eyes gone iron. "Options?" Jax asked, voice threadbare. "Detonated in vacuum," Archivist 12 said. "But jettisoning the cube means opening the atrium shield. Our visitors would die." "Smother it," Thura offered. "Sing it still." "Or I can draw it," Maya said, staring at the cube's reflective faces. She saw herself in each, multiplied, the young officer, the curator, the woman who made casseroles and maps. "The choir wants a keeper, we give it one." She looked at the drones. "We beam the field into my neural implant, the one from Castor Gate. It's a museum of one. Archivist, can you route and contain?" Silence spread, crisp as frost. "It is possible," the AI said finally. "Probability of executive function loss significant." "Director," Jack said, stepping forward as if to take her hand. "Don't. We built this place to carry weight," Maya said. "Someone has to lift first." She set a palm against the cube, heat licked her skin. "Begin transfer on my mark." Outside, the raiders lit engines. Inside, the countdown slipped under 60, and along the ceiling, a silent line of drones turned their lamps toward their new commander, waiting for a human trick to make sense of war. "Mark." Maya felt the transfer bite like winter on a filling. The cube's numbers blurred. A skein of light unspooled into her skull along the old Castor Gate implant, a relic meant for logistics overlays, never for hauling a bomb of absence. Archivist 12 braided failsafes around the circuit, nanosecond membranes that would shear if the field surged. Thura's voice folded through like a rope passed hand to hand. Inside, the choir presented its argument as sanctuary. Soft rooms, blank walls, beds that never creaked when nightmares turned violent. "Erase the sharp edges," it hummed, "and you will not bleed." Maya dug her fingers into the rail of the chair and named what the field reached for. "The ferry schedule at Castor Gate," she whispered. "The convoy names, Bell, Cassat, 2-star, the way the bridge deck smelled like rain inside metal." The wave shuddered, specificity resisted. Stucco generalities hate nails. Outside, the raiders chose the museum's moment of inwardness to press. They loosed drones, a messy aftermarket brood, toward the docking arm that cradled the refugee carriers. Museum drones, centuries old but stubborn, stepped into their path with shields extended. "You are interdicted by non-lethal authority," intoned the leading unit, voice like a law book reading bedtime stories. It vented chaff that burst into bright, geometric kites, holo mines. Raiders flinched and sheared off, wary of brilliance that might be more than show. Jax ran a corridor like a shortstop chasing a bad hop, scooping up a toddler and a dropped inhaler in the same motion. He joined the docents at a choke point made of rolling library stacks. "We practiced fire drills," he told a shaking grandmother. "This is a fancy one." He wanted a gun and was ashamed of wanting it. He wanted the museum to remain a museum and was ashamed of doubting it could. Thura put a palm against Maya's back and sang a tone usually reserved for funerals that end in dancing. "Anchor," they breathed. "Make a knot." Maya found one, her grandmother's casserole pan, dented, flaking enamel, carried from kitchen to church to protest. The choir tried to sand it smooth into food, then tradition, then nothing. Maya held the dent in her mind like a hill. Ren stood at a mezzanine, watching the transfer curl like aurora into Maya's skull. Their device showed the probability trees. Detonation contained if she won the ride. Calamity if she didn't. For a long heartbeat, they seemed very small, not a saboteur, but someone who had been alone too often with the loudness of hurt. An Arun child handed them a paper bracelet the docents were giving out, not a number, it read. Ren stared, then tied it on. The raiders changed tactics. One cut its lights and glided toward an unguarded ventilation spine. Archivist 12 spotted the thermal ghost and slid bulkheads like chess pieces, rerouting the passages into a loop that emptied into the Hall of Reparations, an exhibit where visitors paid small symbolic fines for historical harms, and the receipts were recipes, songs, and commitments. 10 boarders spilled in, weapons up, faced by a concourse of grandmothers and children and a recorded judge explaining restorative justice. Something in the boarders' posture broke, half dropped their guns without thinking. The choir pushed again, sharper now, erasing not from the outside but by asking Maya to volunteer relief. "Give us the bridge," it coaxed. "Set it down, it is heavy." She could feel the edge of a real bargain, like a good stoic feels the edge of surrender. Accept what you cannot change, change what you cannot accept. But stoicism is not surrender, it's discipline. "I will set down the shame," Maya whispered, "not the names." The field reeled. "Transfer at 80%. Archivist 12 said. "Pulse spike in 9 seconds. "Bend the spike," Maya gasped. "Make it work lifting someone else." She sent a ping to the drones. They rotated shields outward and projected the museum's rules as light. Civilians first, proportional response, record everything. The rules became lanes. Raiders saw their choices displayed like menus, and humans, hungry for scripts, chose the lesser flame when seen. The spike hit. The cubes' faces went blank, then turned into mirrors. For a sick instant, Maya looked into herself looking into herself, an infinite regress of second-guessing. Thura cut across the recursion with a childhood chant from the Arun. "If you get lost, hold a hand, count to 4. Ren, unthinking, reached and took Maya's free hand from the other side. 4, they said. "Count with me." The spike flattened, shivering through Maya's implant into a map of safe routes rippling across the station. Doors lit. New exits appeared like shy fish. That heat and light would have scoured the atrium. Now it rewrote floor plans. People moved. The raiders, facing fewer hostages and more drones, backed toward their boats with a predator's disdain curdling into calculation. "Transfer at 94, Archivist 12 said. "Detonation probability falling. Director, you are losing some index links." A flicker crossed Maya's mind, the exact tilt of the sun the day she chose the convoy at Castor Gate. Gone? No, not gone, blurred. She breathed and let it blur. "You can't keep all of a life when you use it as shield." Jax's voice crackled. "Boarders at Gallery B trying to seize the main breaker." The breaker controlled the atrium shield. If it fell, the vacuum solution would be back on the table, and with it the impossible choice. Maya, trembling but upright, lifted her head. "Hold them in the Hall of Witness," she said. "Make them listen." And to the cube and to the choir nested inside it like a calm snake, she said, "We do not build peace out of blankness. We build it out of memory framed with care." The final numerals ticked down towards 0 and stopped. Silence enormous, then a slow wind of breath as hundreds realized the countdown had frozen at a single luminous point. The cube no longer emitted hunger. It radiated attention, like a camera unblinking. Archivist 12 drew the field into a tight braid within Maya's implant and ringed it with routines named after old virtues: prudence, temperance, courage, justice. "Containment achieved," it reported. "Director, do not let your heart rate exceed human norms. The field resonates with adrenaline." "You're telling me not to panic in a battle," Maya said, a laugh tearing loose because crying would break the weave. "Helpful." Boarders, cornered at Gallery B, found themselves in the Hall of Witness, an amphitheater where people recorded small histories. Instinct told them to destroy, but the room presented a different reflex: to speak. Holo screens lit with faces, a farmer from a dust colony describing how debt bent her spine, a raider from another war explaining that he'd joined for a meal and a promise and left with neither. The men wavered. One took a step toward an exit lit in the soft green that meant forgiveness if you confessed. He stopped, confused by the shape of his own desire. Jax had an idea that felt like breaking a rule and also like coming home. He pivoted the reenactment engine away from grand battles and piped in the most ordinary recordings. Baseball play-by-plays from a century ago, traffic reports from rainy cities, a teacher explaining the Pythagorean theorem with toothpicks. The null choir's sterile harmonics tangled in the weird asymmetry of human dailiness. Like the code talkers, he told Archivist 12, except our code is clutter. Thura joined the chorus with a catalog of Arun mistakes, disastrous harvest plans, clumsy peace offerings, sung without shame. We do not hide errors, they told a boarder who had lowered his rifle and was staring at his hands as if surprised by their uses. We turn them so they catch light. Ren hovered at the balcony rail, trembling. Their device still hummed with choir permissions, but the bracelet against their wrist, not a number, itched like conscience. They watched Maya, face pale, shoulders steadied by two cultures' songs, holding inside her head a weapon made of wanting to forget. The choir's remote leaders whispered through the device, complete the plan, jettison the shield, purify. Ren thought of the child sticker, I am a witness, and realized purity was just another word for nobody to argue with you. Jax, Ren said into a side channel, voice barely there. I can reverse their injectors. I can turn the pollen into a sponge, but I need access to the North Maintenance umbilical. It's outside. Too hot, Jax said automatically, watching two drones body block a raider's charge with a grace like hockey defense. You'll be exposed. Ren swallowed. You trust civilians to sail to Dunkirk. Jax closed his eyes to something old in his family, an uncle who'd driven a church bus for civil rights marchers, a mother who'd packed lunches for strike lines. Go, he said. I'll give you a corridor. Ren ran. The museum became a city that loved them, doors opening, lights tilting brighter, stairwells whispering where to put feet. At the umbilical hatch, Cold waited like an honest animal. Ren clipped on a tether, palmed the panel, and stepped into space above a billion stars. The injector flowers swarmed the vault as if it were a tree in spring. Ren's device pulsed a counter pattern, and the flowers turned inward, sipping their own poison. Inside, the raiders made their last bad bet. A Corvette, its nose painted with teeth old as cave chalk, burned toward the atrium shield. If it cracked the dome, the cube could be flung clear, and the museum would lose the dilemma at the price of everyone inside. They're going to ram, Archivist 12 said, as flat as any shipborne AI announcing weather. Time to impact, 90. Drone intercept probability low without lethality. Then make lethality unnecessary, Maya said, the words coming from a place beneath language where stubbornness lives. We can move minds, move space. The vault's architects had installed a mass-lensing art piece in the corridor of relativity. Tourists played with it to feel their steps grow heavy and light. Juice it. Conduits groaned. The lens surged, blooming into a rippled corridor that led nowhere safe. Drones towed glittering decoys into its mouth. The Corvette, seeing prey, lined up and found its own momentum bent. It slewed, scraping the lensing corridor like a spoon hitting glass. Sparks fanned. It shed speed and pride. At the mouth of the museum's docking ring, refugee tug crews, grandfathers with hands like rope, lashed tractor beams into a net and hauled. The impact when it came was the kind that knocks fillings loose and prayers free. The Corvette stuck, wedged like a cork in a bottle. Drones clambered over its hull with mag clamps, punching non-lethal darts into thruster ports. In the Hall of Witness, boarders threw weapons into a bin labeled returns and began to talk like men waking from a bad story. Ren, tethered to the skin of the station, watched injector flowers turn gray and fall apart, snow in vacuum. They laughed once, relief like a cough, and then their tether went slack as a micrometeor sliced it. For an instant, Ren hung between the museum and forever. The bracelet tugged at their wrist, not a number. "Archivist," Ren said, too calm. "I require retrieval." A drone pivoted, saw, leapt. Its old joints screamed. It caught Ren with an awkward gentleness and slammed back to the hull, leaving a streak of paint like a signature. Inside, Maya felt the field pulse with the save, then faint toward her memory of her grandmother's laugh. She let it take the laugh's exact pitch. She kept the joke. It was a tax she could pay. "Status?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Attack abated," Archivist 12 said. "Casualties, some, most breathing. The choir's external network is uncertain. We have muddled it." The AI hesitated, rare. "Director, your implant holds a seed they will covet. They will come again." "Then we make coming costly," Maya said. She stood, the room swam, then steadied. The cube, quiet now, showed not numbers but faces, the ones in the memorial reels, the ones who'd held the bridge. She could no longer recall the exact color of the sky that day. She remembered their names. The Concorde called it a breach of charter. Drones under museum command. A mass lens weaponized. Refugees sheltered in a zone pledged neutral. The hearing convened in the auditorium beneath the ring station hull, banners furled. Maya sat at the central table with a bandage at her temple and an elegant absence where some memories had been. Thura sat beside her like a cliff anyone could lean against. Ren, a temporary badge-reading volunteer in shaky ink, stood in the back with Jax. The Concorde's envoy, a cloth-silvered Kyra with eyes that measured, opened with ritual. "Peace is made by rules, you bent yours." A murmur rustled through the gathered like wind over tall grass. Maya didn't tell a defense, she told a story. "At Midway," she said, "pilots launched with uncertain headings because opportunity does not wait for ideal maps. They found the enemy by a chain of near misses and courage. They paid in fire and the tide turned." She nodded toward the drone that had caught Ren. Its shell was scuffed into humility. "We turned a museum into a life-saving device because the alternative was a mausoleum." She glanced at the families from the carriers, sitting hand in hand, shirts still smoke-stained. "If neutrality means watching people die inside our walls, then we have mislabeled our virtue." The envoy tilted their head. "You risked making a shrine into a fortress." "We made it into a harbor," Thura said gently. "We cannot worship wars and call it learning. We must make of them a grammar for mercy. Harbors have rules, no firing across the docks. We added those to our lights." Jax cued a recording, raiders lowering rifles in the Hall of Witness, a tug captain reading a poem while tractor beams hummed. The envoy watched, expression unreadable, while Ren quieted their hands by clenching the bracelet. When invited to speak, Ren stepped forward and did something the choir would despise. They confessed, precise and unadorned. "I believed forgetting was kindness," they said. "I nearly turned it into murder. The museum held me to account without destroying me. If you need a sentence, give me work curating the cost of erasure." The envoy's eyes flicked, not quite surprise. "Restorative assignments," they said. "Unfashionable, braver than prisons sometimes." They issued findings. The vault had acted beyond its charter. Mitigating circumstances overwhelmed the letter. A new codicil would define non-lethal interposition as lawful museum practice when protecting civilians. "But the seed you carry," they added, looking at Maya, "is an invitation to siege." On cue, a beacon flared in deep space, a choir signature reordered into a spear. A single ship, not raider but missionary, burned in fast with a payload that read like a hymn to absence. It would not ram. It would park at a safe legal distance and sing until memories went thin as vellum. "Then we will sing back," Maya said, standing too fast and hiding the wobble with a smile. "We will not meet them with guns. We will meet them with a coalition." She mapped tasks with the old ease. Refugees who wished to help became ushers of memory. The Arun built counterpoint choruses. Kyra diplomats offered legal scaffolding. Dock crews tuned tugs into instrument panels. "We'll form a chain like Dunkirk's small boats," she said. "But for meaning, we'll ferry stories back and forth, redundancy until redundancy looks like love." Archivist 12 published a protocol. When the choir broadcast began, the vault would stagger its archives across living minds in bite-sized chunks. Lines from letters, names, smells, jokes, maps. Volunteers would memorize, speak, and trade, keeping information moving so the field could not settle. The program had a plain name, Casserole, because casseroles are how you feed people forever. The missionary ship arrived and opened its throat. The song that poured out tasted painless. It asked nothing except that everything hurt less. Holo glass winked, tired people smiled drowsily. Then the casserole network lit. A boy on crutches recited the serial numbers of a decommissioned frigate like a baseball statistician. An Arun elder told a parable about a tree that leaned into storms to strengthen its roots. A Kyra judge explained proportionality in terms a child could draw in crayon. The missionary's song faltered. It had not expected to be answered by a chorus. Still, it was strong. The vault's lights dimmed like an old auditorium at matinee. Maya felt the seeds stir and lean, eager to escape into the choir outside. She turned to the drone captain, if such a thing can be said. "Form a shell," she commanded softly. "Not to strike, to keep faith." Drones took up positions around the station, lamps in a constellation. They projected the rules in bright banners and knew because learning happens, stories scrolling like subtitles. The emptiness could not find a clean surface on which to settle. The missionary adjusted, notes sharpening to needle. The lens corridor thrummed in sympathy, a bad bridge resonating with the wrong marching cadence. The Old Navy advice came back, break step on a bridge. "Break step," Maya murmured into the system. The casserole chorus staggered its rhythms, lullabies against court transcripts, jokes interrupting hymns. The missionary's song, built on perfect meter, stuttered. "Now," Wren said, breath fogging the glass of a maintenance nook as they worked, "give them a mirror." They rewired the external flowers that had survived into reflectors. The missionary's own harmonics came back with the museum's rules blended in. Protect non-combatants, seek restoration. Do not erase the dead. In the face of its own injunctions, the missionary ship faltered like a zealot shown a baby. It flared engines, pride, not strategy, and tried to leave. The tugs, those small boats of the void, laid a soft web of tractor beams and let it go, but slowly, like releasing a grieving friend from a hug only when they straighten. It crossed the buffer and winked into the dark, a sermon unanswered by a better sermon. Maya sat down abruptly. The implant thrummed, sore and patient. She could not remember the name of her first commanding officer. She remembered the officer's habit of cutting sandwiches diagonally so one triangle could be shared. She cried then, not for the loss alone, but for the kind of keeping humans make when the ledger cannot be perfect. They kept the museum open. It seemed wrong and exactly right to hang a "welcome" banner beneath a hull that still smelled of scorched paint. Families returned to exhibits and found them changed. Placards now included tags labeled cost and care. The Hall of Witness installed a new booth where visitors spoke of temptations to forget and why they resisted. In the logistics gallery, kids played a game called Casserole where you had to keep many pots warm with limited hands. If one cooled, the others could share heat. Wren took the job they'd asked for, curating The Gentle Knife, an exhibit on erasure as promised kindness and its failures. They accepted restorative terms that looked like community service and felt like penance done with neighbors. They taught tours with a voice that had scar tissue. When a visitor asked whether forgetting could ever be moral, Wren would say, "Yes, privacy, mercies to the self. But when the forgetting makes someone else pay the price, we set the knife down." The Concord codicil passed after bruising debate. The vault could deploy drones and deception so long as lethal force remained last resort, codified and recorded. Critics fumed about mission creep. Activists argued that museums could no longer hide from the emergencies of their age. Maya listened, took notes, and made changes that turned arguments into procedures. She added a parley corridor lined with blank paper and pens. Raiders who came again, a few did, found themselves walking through a tunnel where enemies had written apologies and promises, and some walked out changed. The null choir didn't dissolve. Ideas don't, they adapt. But their easy recruitment stalled. It is difficult to sell oblivion to people who have been taught to carry memory without letting it carry them. Some of the choir's young drifted to the vault and asked to help with data hygiene, with grief groups, with the choir that sang counterpoint. A few true believers hovered at the edges like cold weather. The drones, those old iron dogs, accepted a new charter. They became the docent guard, painted not in camouflage but in museum white with a trim of gold. They rode out on errands that looked like evacuations, rescues, arbitration escorts. Their commands were public. A child could read them and argue. They failed sometimes. That went into the records too, with names, with the things tried and why. Maya lived with the seed inside her, not as a martyrdom but as maintenance. Archivist 12 learned to tap it for good, using its tendency to smooth to help frightened patients through panic. For instance, without letting it recruit for oblivion. Some mornings Maya woke and could not taste coffee. By lunch the flavor returned because a docent told a story about the first pot they'd ever burned. People became her backups. In staff meetings, she said, "Institutional knowledge lives in bodies. Write it down and tell it out loud. Redundancy is compassion." She visited the Bridge Memorial alone sometimes and said the names into the cube, which recorded them without stealing them. She no longer remembered the exact tone of the sky, but she remembered the cadence of boots, the rhythm of orders, the story of the ferry captain who refused to cut his rope because cutting ropes becomes a habit. She taught new docents to look for habits. On the anniversary of the attack, they held a festival shaped like a town fair. There were stalls of food from 100 worlds, games where kids piloted tugs through holographic debris to earn a sticker. I return what I find. Ren stood by a paper wall where anyone could leave a memory to be carried by someone else for a year. Thura presided over a singing that braided mistakes into harmonies that tasted like bread. Jax organized a pickup baseball game in a long corridor because no matter the century, some things soothe. Maya gave a speech she kept short. "We built a museum between galaxies because we wanted a place big enough for what we've suffered and done. We learned it is also a harbor, and harbors are busy, messy kinds of peace. Our trick," she smiled wry, "is stubborn hope with logistics. History doesn't settle, we do." She looked up at the suspended hulls, the banners, the faces. "People say we stand on the precipice. I think we are building the ground." As night fell, an artificial turn dimming the atrium to show the long drift of stars. The old alarm whispered once, but now it sounded like breath before song. Archivist 12 tuned the lights cooler, then warmer, then bright, a pulse like a heartbeat. The docent guard drifted in formation beyond the windows, lamps painting arcs of blue and red and gold. Refugee carriers, refitted now as pilgrim ships, queued to depart carrying volunteers who had memorized a stranger's story and promised to tell it elsewhere. Between galaxies, the vault kept its place and its purpose. It had scars. A scorch on Bay 4, a hairline crack in a window panel patched with clear resin, an exhibit label rewritten because the people it described had asked for a different verb. It also had a line that ran through crew and visitors like braided cable. "We will not forget, and we will not be ruled by remembering." Humanity's trick was not to turn war into glory, but into homework and chores and casseroles and promises made in small rooms and kept in space.